Sure, I'm fat, which I use that term to be straightforward and not self-deprecating at all. I am funny occasionally, and I'd like to think that I have a lot of friends, but I have spent most of my life determined to cut the stereotype of being the funny fat friend. You know, the one that we see in all of the rom-coms and everywhere in Hollywood. Because of this, I don't think I really appreciated humor and the way that humor can really change a situation, because I was so focused on being emotional and evocative and poignant and quotable and having this sort of like picture perfect scene when it came to every memory, from my wedding proposal to my birth experience. So naturally, when I prepared for labor, I was thinking I was writing a scene for an Emmy-nominated drama. I knew that my husband, who will say that words are not his first language, I knew that somehow he would find it in the depths of his soul to say the perfect thing at the perfect time. And that he would just know everything to do, and it would be scripted, and it was something that we would talk about for the rest of our lives and tell our grandchildren, and it would be embroidered on a pillow in our house. Right? So it hadn't even crossed my mind that humor would become the most important instrument put to use in our labor and delivery room. I would like to think of myself as kind of like a semi-Frenchy mom. Did not come up with that term myself. I'm sure you've all seen it on Instagram. Not against Western medicine or intervention. I knew I was going to birth at a hospital, but I really do embrace the mind-body-spirit connection and knew that I wanted to have support in that. So we hired a doula. We attended both a traditional childbirth and labor class, and also read a book on hypnobirthing, which isn't as hippie as it sounds. I was determined to have an unmedicated birth. I decided I was going to be Superwoman. After our birth class, I knew I was going to be empowered and that I could do it. I practiced breathing exercises my whole third trimester. I was doing yoga and breathing and meditating, and I figured I had it all. But what's the saying about best laid plans? The ultimate dark comedian, the universe, threw us a few curveballs before we met our daughter. So I was considered a high-risk pregnancy. I will say that in quotes. I'm of advanced maternal age. I have a high BMI. I had a prior pregnancy that resulted in late-term loss. I conceived via IVF, and finally, I had insulin-dependent gestational diabetes. By the time I had the gestational diabetes diagnosis, I really started to feel like the butt of a cruel joke. Thankfully, we had an amazing care team whom I sought out for their weight neutrality and progressive approach to sort of like holistic health and birth experience. So despite my best efforts to make it to a spontaneous labor and like eating spicy foods and curve walking and bouncing on the wall, the care team, my husband and I decided that induction at 39 weeks was going to be the best possible scenario for us. And this is where it starts to unravel. So her royal shyness, a nickname given to our daughter during her 12-week ultrasound, had been head down and ready for delivery since just after 34, 35 weeks. But in our final check before induction, she was suddenly in a breech investigation. She was dubbed her royal shyness by my husband because she stubbornly never let us see her face. She was never at the right angle for any of the pictures that they wanted to take, and Chris really made us believe that she just decided that paparazzi was like not for her. So it was no surprise to me or to Chris that in her final days inside the womb, she was too cozy and shy to make an easy appearance. While I left this final appointment feeling disappointed that our birth would likely be a C-section, I immediately fixated on trying our best to turn the baby, and hilarity ensued. Trying to invert a fat pregnant body is nothing short of a comedy sketch. My husband was on board, and we watched YouTube videos, and we tried all the tricks to get my body into a straight line, upside down, to tilt the baby to get her to turn. Neither one of us could stop laughing long enough to make this effort effective. So cut to me, laying naked from the waist down on our bed, with my husband pointing a flashlight at the birth canal and playing Total Eclipse of the Heart at my inner thigh. So for those of you who are uninitiated, that song's chorus repeats, "Turn around, Greg." Again and again and again. Our dog was even involved in this concerted effort. She was pressing her head against my belly, really willing this baby to come out. And lo and behold, after 3 days of waiting, we arrived at the hospital for our scheduled C-section, and she had flipped. So anyone who's had a scheduled C-section or surgery in general knows that the coolest part is not being able to eat for like 12 hours before you go into surgery. And hanging out with a starving pregnant person is not for the faint of heart. Thankfully, my husband is a saint. And while he and Marissa and I waited with bated breath as they gave us the okay to finally eat food, Chris decided that the most logical choice would be to toss blueberries in the air directly at my face while I was in the hospital bed and hope that I would catch them.
It was so charming, though.
I did catch them. I don't know how, because I've never caught food in my mouth ever in my life. And this was kind of like the first moment where we realized that levity and humor was going to be the thing that guided us through our birth experience. Marissa got some wonderful photos of the blueberry experience, and my surprised face as I call them. So at this point, the doctors and nurses were referring to our baby as an unstable lie, which is the term for kids or fetuses, babies that haven't decided in a position, like on a position. So she had so much room in my very long torso that she would kind of do a somersault and move, you know. So they decided she was an unstable lie and we should proceed with the induction. At this point, I felt like the unstable lie because I was lying on my back in a hospital bed, not sure what was going on. They decided that the first step in induction would be misoprostol. So we would go through sort of a medicated induction process, and they would hope and hope that my cervix was going to ripen enough and that I would go into natural labor. At this point, I was glad that I had prepared the guided meditations, affirmations, and all of the perfect words to say at the perfect time during my experience and hadn't just ditched it out the window when I thought I was going to have C-section. So I knew that everything was going to be magical. We were back on board. We had the first dose of medication, and then we're waiting in the bed, and then I was able to get up and walk laps in the hospital, which feels very surreal because hospitals, much like airports or casinos, like don't have any sort of time. People are just like coming and going at all times of day, and I was in a bathrobe with like dirty hair walking the halls of the hospital and not caring about it, which is sort of the fascinating part. So the other piece of Her Royal Shyness's gift to her mother in this process is that I had an anterior placenta. So my placenta was in between my baby and the front of my back, meaning that it was a very convenient place for her to hide during any of our examinations. So as we got closer and closer to a point where they were giving me more and more drugs and trying to make labor happen, they had me on Pitocin so that I was on a continuous heart monitor. And our daughter was in such a position tucked behind the placenta that I couldn't even like wiggle in bed without her coming off of the monitor. So anyone who knows me knows I can barely sit still for like a half an hour, let alone 2 days in bed, in a hospital bed. And I knew that I was gonna have to like employ some serious, mental toughness to get through this time. So remember the guided meditations, breathing exercises. They really did get me through a lot of early labor. But I was, heavily preparing for this whole event over the weeks leading up to my labor because I wasn't working. I had all the time in the world to read and watch videos online and whatnot. And my husband was working very hard to prepare for parental leave. So he was not able to be as present reading the guided meditations that I had assigned to him. So the one meditation that he chose to read was a meditation about a baby deer. And you're supposed to think of the baby deer as your newborn baby, and you're walking through the woods, and you're the mother deer. Melissa's gonna think. And you're walking through the woods, and you come upon the baby deer. Okay, so my husband, the fun guy, has an association for everything. He is the person that finds the YouTube video that has the one line of material, that relates to the sentence you said, etc. So I don't know if it's because Marissa is named Marissa, the baby deer, whatnot, but he instantly was transported to the movie My Cousin Vinny. So Marissa Tomei, award-winning actress, for her role in My Cousin Vinny, has a famous monologue in the movie where she talks about her partner going hunting and whether or not he feels badly because he's going to see and potentially shoot a little baby deer. And she has a very thick New York accent in the movie, and she starts with, and the little baby deer just put her little baby deer lips down to the water to take a drink, and then bam, and that's the movie. And in the movie, it's very funny. So of course, my husband can't read the baby deer meditation without instantly losing his mind. So that became a long-standing joke for the three of us. So much so that later in our journey, when I was starting to breastfeed, there was a lot of, just put your little baby lips. So, these were the things that kind of got us through that early labor. I think the best part of my labor and delivery story, between me and my husband, we hadn't been spending a ton of time together because we were kind of like two ships. We were just at different places and not really connecting very well. And on the first night that we were in the hospital before our baby was born, we were laying side by side, me in a hospital bed and him in a cot, and he looked at me and said, "This is the best date we've ever had." Aww. And I felt, here's the moment, this is the moment, and I felt like it was like this preteen sleepover summer camp where I saw my husband as like my best friend, and it totally changed the trajectory of the rest of our birth experience. So fast forward to when things really start to get moving. I'm gonna run out of time. And Marissa had come back to the hospital after leaving to look at a house and
that we did not
get some sleep because I was in this limbo place for a long time. And at that point, we had become known as like having the best vibes on the labor and delivery floor. We had a great playlist. We were laughing a lot. Everyone wanted to come hang out in our room, including Stratton Dangerfield. Yes, Dr. Stratton Dangerfield. She is the most badass anesthesiologist fellow at Brigham and Women's. And she did a great job of matching the vibe, right? So she happened to be teaching a class for us before our birth experience, and then join us in our room to say hello, and then eventually, when I had a C-section after many, many hours of labor, because my stubborn child had a head that was just too large. So we, Stratton Dangerfield and some other key players at the hospital, both Stacy, our night nurse, and Heather, really helped us to kind of zone in on this vibe that we wanted, this party time when we were getting ready to meet our daughter. And another key moment that I will never forget is when we finally were getting ready to go into the C-section. And it was like an all hands on deck moment where everyone had to get me ready. And Stacy, our night nurse, who'd been with us for 3 nights, looked at Marissa, handed her a hair trimmer, and said, "Can you please trim her pubic hair?" Don't worry, Marissa's that good of a friend. So now we are fully bonded. She's never going anywhere. She's Auntie Marissa because we've been through some shit.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Did you at least name your baby after her?
Yeah.
Stratton was pushing really hard for it.
Stratton was pushing very hard for it. Marissa was also a consideration. I will spoil it and tell you that neither one of them won that out. But Marissa really helped push us for a vibe in the C-section operating room that was going to feel like a birthday party. And that is what cinched everything for me. People were dancing. I was out of it. I, turned to my husband at one point and thought I was going to throw up. And then Stratton Dangerfield looked at me and said, "Did you put Wrecking Ball on this playlist?" And I said, "I sure did. Have you heard what my daughter has put me through?" When Francesca finally entered the world, she arrived at 12/12 on 3/3. Coincidentally, both Stratton Dangerfield and I are born on 12/3. And Francesca might be a queer icon because she was born to chaperone's phenomenon. So we're thinking big things for this track group. So just a few days after birth, while we're still in the hospital, we had the opportunity to visit with Marissa again because she happened to be at Brigham for another birth. And we were reminiscing about our labor story and probably about my cousin Vinny. And I was sure that I was going to learn where the phrase "bust a gut" came from because I had just had a C-section and I was holding a pillow and trying not to die as I laughed for what seemed like hours. So after this experience, from start to finish, entering the hospital to walking home with our baby, I learned that I needed to try to think about humor because these are where the magic moments happen. So the poignant, dramatic moments are still nice, of course, but laughter is the best moment.
Love you so much.